Okay, so today I want to talk a little bit about the importance of the non-academic part of your application. Um, and it, when colleges are looking at students, obviously first they look at the academic part, and that is very important. In fact, it's the first thing they look at, and obviously having a strong academic uh, record, uh, rigorous courses, and good grades, good test scores is all going to really help. But at the end of the day, most students do their research and they apply to schools where they are academically a good fit. So I would conservatively estimate about 75 to 80% of students who apply to any given college are going to be in the academic range. Um, Unlike in other countries where they may solely focus on the academics, in the US, they're really looking at, is the student a good academic fit? Could they compete against the kind of students we have at our school? And once they've determined that, then they're going to move to the non-academic part of your application and try to understand, what is the student passionate about? What is the likelihood that the student will bring something to our campus? Or certainly they're looking for evidence that you're going to be highly engaged on their campus. And this can come out through various essays in the application. I think the Why Us essay is probably one of the most appropriate places for it to come out, because you're going to be identifying the things that you've been engaged in high school and want to continue to do in college. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, because I think, by the time you get to 12th grade and you're looking at, what is the theme of my application? Or one of the exercises I like to have my students do is read through past applications. And I think it helps because you get a better understanding of the whole before you start working on the parts. And you realize that, in a given essay, I don't need to talk about everything that I've been engaged in, or all parts of my personality and passions, but you can focus on one of the areas in one part of the application and then on other areas in other parts of the application. Um, but I think the other thing that students get a sense of when they do that exercise is that, and then they're reading other people's applications, is that, our human tendency is that we have to kind of categorize or summarize a lot of information down to kind of a distilled understanding of who that person is. So a couple of the mistakes that I think students make when they understand first that this non-academic part of the application is the differentiator, essentially, among those 80% of the other students who look academically very similar to you. And a lot of students, when they understand that distinction, immediately assume that they have to do something huge. I often call it the cure cancer problem, that they have to do some massive undertaking in order to stand out from all the rest of the kids in their class or the other students from around the world that are applying. Well, college admissions aren't expecting you to cure cancer when you're a teenager. And I think the other bigger problem there is that when you're trying to do that, um, your life is busy. High school uh, takes a lot of your time, and those big ideas end up just getting kicked down the road, and you don't end up doing anything. Um, Second big problem I see students doing is, thinking there are certain activities that college admissions people want to see, with community service, or start a club, being at the very top of that list. And that's not the case either. There aren't really sensitive spots that they're expecting to see in an application. And in fact, I think the problem with this mostly is, if you're doing things because you think they look good, that's exactly how they end up looking on the application. Like, it's not really an authentic interest that you have, but you think it looks good. And in fact, you end up kind of looking generic because there's a lot of other kids that are doing that. Third big problem I would say is when students try to do a whole bunch of things, maybe because they don't know what looks good, they just try to do a lot. Um, that problem, again, if you think about that process of reading many applications and trying to evaluate or summarize, who the student is, um, in 200-300 words, describe kind of who they are. What are you going to look like? you know he's the joiner. Bring a clipboard, this girl will sign up for anything. So you're not really standing out because we don't really know what you're interested in. So if we reverse engineer that and we kind of look at, all right, we've got about year and a half, 2 years, and we say, let's focus on my authentic interests. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I would say that um, if you're not working on your authentic interests, you're probably going to procrastinate it. There's too many other things that impinge on your time. So we should first kind of maybe define what are your authentic interests, and then try to broaden that definition to the reasons that you love what you do. And those reasons can then become really good springboards, if you will, to more creatively cultivate those interests. So it might, I think the tendency is to kind of think about ability or achievement within your personal interests. That's one way to talk about what you do, but it's not the most important, or doesn't have to be the most important thing. I find this particularly true when I have students who are very passionate about sports, and sports are played at an extremely high level in college. So it's going to be hard to raise eyebrows by being the best basketball player in your school. Usually you're going to need to be playing, I would say, at a state or national level, to get any coach to be looking at you. But that doesn't mean that basketball doesn't have to be your passion. It's just a matter of kind of broadening that, why basketball is important to me, how it has shaped my worldview, and then maybe other things that you do through your activity of basketball that have helped you grow. So today I want to talk about a quick kind of brainstorming activity that you could do to generate some interesting ideas. And I really like you to think of this as an uncensored brainstorming. Sometimes the craziest ideas I've seen have ended up being really, once you understand the root of reality in it, they've ended up being really interesting things to talk about. And one other area that I'll talk about in this is, we often find that when we encounter certain obstacles or hindrances as we go towards our interests, we end up kind of pivoting and going in a different direction, just like, okay, that didn't work. I would like you to change that thought process. And when you see an obstacle, look at that as a beacon for your being on the right path. I mean, nothing meaningful is ever going to be that easy. And again, sometimes talking about the obstacles or the trip ups that you've had along the way tend to be the best way to describe why you're passionate about a particular activity that you're involved in. So we want to kind of start with that brainstorming, see how many crazy ideas we can come up with, and then, commit to doing one or two of these goals every month. I think one of the reasons why the non-academic part of your application is so important to admissions is that, well, and there are many reasons for this. And I think we talked about differentiating yourself from all the other applicants who might be academically very similar. But I think it's also because college is not just about the classes. In many colleges, they're fully residential. So you're living there 24/7, and you're probably only in class about 15 to 18 hours a week. So that's a lot of time outside of class. And that time is not really, I mean, it's not part of your degree. And, it's really more of a personal choice as to how you fill that time. There are many clubs, organizations, research, internships, part-time jobs. There's so many things that you could be doing outside of class, but nobody's going to come tap you on the shoulder. Nobody's going to ask you if you want to get involved in this. So I think when they're looking at the application, one of the things they're looking at is all the academic stuff has informed us how good is he or she at doing what he or she has to do. And that's important because there are things that you have to do in college also. But the non-academic part is helping them understand, does he have the maturity to seek out his own interests? Does she have the passion to engage with some of the things that we have going on in school, or the initiative to start something at our school? So I just think, what better way to demonstrate that than having many short-term goals over the course of the next 2 years? And quite likely you've already started that in 9th and 10th grade or even earlier. But I think, forcing yourself to have these regular, consistent monthly goals related to your authentic interests forces you to keep those things in the forefront of your mind. And when they're in the forefront of your mind, I find you just get chance discoveries. Maybe it's just that your mind is looking for those opportunities. You're thinking about, well, what could I do next month? What's another way to express my passion for this activity or interest? So that's kind of where, this brainstorming exercise hopefully will get you kickstarted on that. And trust me, just stick with this for a few months, and I think you'll start to see the arc of your story developing. And when you see that, that will be the motivation for you to continue. So let me just share my screen and I'll give you kind of an example of that. One second, just turn off my video. All right, so in this example, and basically what I'd like you to try to do is you just put whatever your particular interest is in a big circle. Okay, so he's put the arts, all right? And then inside the circle, I want you to just jot down any particular areas that you currently are engaging in that activity, or also reasons why you love that activity. Okay, so you can see he's put in here writing, multimedia, photography, theater, drawing, and he's also talked about how he loves it because of its expression, stories, communication. And then, once you've defined your area of interest, I want you to start to draw lines from each of these things inside that go outside the circle with tangible ideas of things that you might be able to do, okay, to cultivate these things inside the circle. And you'll see that now it expands it beyond just the arts, right? So you'll have all these different ideas out here. Let me show you another example. Let's see. Okay, here's one of film, all right? So the person's saying, I love film because of its ability to tell the truth, advertising, creating images, bringing joy to people. And then you see these lines coming out. So bringing joy to people could be make Khan Academy-like videos, tutorials, work with kids, tutor with video, or storytelling. Listen to storytelling process on The Moth. Again, Moth is a podcast where people tell their true stories. Write a screenplay. Okay, and then across from creating images, try to make a story with only pictures. Start a blog with photos, improve my photography. And you can see some of these tangible ideas would then lead you to think of other ways or other specifics. So if improve my photography, maybe he takes a photography course, or, does some research on, use of light and composition in photography. So basically, again, just to be clear, in the circle, why am I good at this? What do I feel when I do this? Why do I love this? What rewards do I get when I do this? And then outside the circle would be taking each of the things in the circle, brainstorm ideas that you could do. And these things on the outside hopefully will represent those monthly goals. And the next thing that you want to do is, I don't know if I'm sharing my screen. The next thing you want to do is be very focused on how do I define these goals within the month. Okay, I'm going to stop this here and I'll just turn my camera back on. Right, so essentially defining your goals within the month, you want to be sure that you are being realistic. I think an important part of this process is that you're logging successes, that, over the course of the months, you're seeing that you're actually achieving what you set out to do. It's not as important that you're doing big things. We already addressed that. And if you do come across a big idea, hopefully you'll already be in the habit of breaking that down into smaller goals. So I found this works. I don't think that you can fail. Even if you were to do this for 18 months and, all it was a lot of small goals, the accumulation of them is going to be very interesting. And the story that they tell and the connection chronologically and how it's evolved over a year and a half is going to be very impressive. But the other aspect of this is that even the failures are going to bring some interesting learning. And that learning is what you can talk about. I remember I had a kid, and I always tell the story. I was trying to develop a shoe using some physics term called piezo or piezoelectricity that could generate enough electricity to charge a small device. And God bless him, he went through many prototypes, and I can tell you by 12th grade, the only thing he had invented was the ugliest shoe I've ever seen. But nonetheless, he really came to understand how engineering or technology is not lightning bolts of inspiration. It's painful iteration over time. And it just was fascinating to see his process. And again, I think a college would read that and say, well, look how much this kid did with so little resources. Imagine what he's going to be able to do when he comes to our campus with labs that are open 24 hours a day and all the resources within arm's length. So again, there's just no way it can fail except if you don't do it. So, all right, I'm going to keep this video short. I hope this was helpful. Talk to you soon.